What was your worst experience at a doctor's office? It took me 13 years to find out my gallbladder was dead. I went to my doctor repeatedly, then another, 7 different doctors. I had excruciating pain that never moved, always flared when I ate. It would last for hours. If I felt the pain coming on, it would stick around for about 6 to 9 hours before it abated. Solid 10 on the pain scale. If I ate anything other than toast the next day, it would come back. Impossible to sit, stand, move, lie down, exist. Went to the ER a few times. They'd give me ultrasound after ultrasound, and because they saw no gallstones, they always wrote it off. You're probably constipated. You're just overweight. After begging for a referral to another specialist, they gave me a full-body MRI and several hours of testing, a HEDA scan. This was the test that caught it. To watch the minute-by-minute function of my organs, turns out my gallbladder had 93% non-function, just a mostly dead organ. They had me scheduled for surgery the next week. I had it out, and it was life-changing. It was only after having it out that I realized how freaking common the surgery is and how any doctor who'd given me even vague consideration might have realized a gallbladder can malfunction without stones. I did not know how to advocate for myself because I kept being dismissed. I wish I'd been more assertive because I suffered a lot. Me. My stomach is really hurting. I can't stand up straight, it hurts so bad I feel like I'm going to puke and or crap my pants and the pants of everyone in a 4-yard radius. 4 hours later, doctor, here's a prescription for ibuprofen, take some Pepto, peace out. Sunday morning. Me, my stomach is still hurting really bad. I haven't slept at all since Thursday. I haven't eaten at all. Yet I still feel like I'm going to be spraying from both ends. 2 hours later. Doctor, cool, let's get a scan done. An hour later. Doctor, yeah, looks like your appendix is about to burst. You will need surgery immediately. 2 hours later. Doctor, the surgeon will be coming in a few hours. 3 hours later. Doctor, yeah, the surgeon will be coming in tomorrow afternoon. 1 hour later. Me, I just left this other hospital because my appendix is about to burst and they can't help until tomorrow. 45 minutes later. Better, doctor. Okay, we got your scan results. Let's cut you open. 2 hours, 1 surgery, and $84,000 later. Nurse, your insurance will cover most of this, but for some reason, even though our hospital is covered, your anesthesiologist isn't, so another $3,000 will need to come out of pocket. 6 months, dozens of phone calls, hours and hours on hold, and calling one insurance agent an idiot later. Insurance, turns out you were covered, we just filed the claim wrong. At a hospital. A little context, I am white, my wife is African American. We were checking in for the birth of our child. It was after normal business hours, so we were checking in through the emergency room. A woman, white, was there in front of us. She had a bad accident and cut off a toe. My wife and I were waiting patiently next to each other because the woman was definitely the priority. They check her in and we walk up to check in. They ask my wife some questions and take her back for vitals before we are to go to maternity. A few minutes later, a nurse indicates that they are done and I can join my wife. I start to walk to her when a security guard, late 50s white male, stops me and yells at me. He puts his hand on my firearm. He then insists I join my wife. I step forward towards my wife and he grabs the handle again and orders me into a room. I step into it where I see the woman with her toe cut off. He steps in and continues to yell at me and the woman for not listening to him. He berated her for having an idiot for a husband. It took another security guard and a nurse to stop his shouting and to tell him my wife was the African American woman. He didn't finish his shift before he was terminated, but it didn't make the experience any less bad. My family practitioner referred me to the therapist connected to their office. Before our session, I made sure to ask about patient confidentiality. The therapist assured me that it was all private, locked behind a different level of access, so only she would be able to see this part of my records. I was struggling a lot with my mental health at the time and really needed the help, so I was brutally honest about what I was going through during the session. At my next appointment with my family practitioner, the nurse doing my pre-assessment started going down the list of all the very private things I had told the therapist, asking me for updates for the record. There was no extra layer of privacy. The therapist had simply entered it into my patient notes that the entire office staff could see. I ended up walking out, never went back to that office. 1. I was taken back to an examination room and got really thirsty while waiting for the dermatologist. I went to the front to ask for water. On my way back, I walked into the wrong room and saw the doctor and another patient. He was holding the guy's dong. I said, "I am so sorry," and the guy mumbled, "It's okay," as I raced off. I still feel awful. I mentioned to my boyfriend that I didn't realize dermatologists inspect dongs, and he was like, "Contrary to popular belief, scientists have found that dongs are in fact covered in skin." 2. I read in a magazine many years ago about a lady who went to the gyno and gave a urine sample only to find there was no toilet paper. So she pulled out a tissue of her purse and used that instead. When she got on the table for checkup, the doctor peeled a US priority stamp from her labia and gave her a curious look. It had come from her purse. Walked in with chest pains and severe pain in the area around the left shoulder blade. Here, fill this out, wait over here, walk back here. Go back to the waiting room, walk back here again. Doctor walks up, first time I saw him, hands me discharge papers. Follow up with your doctor in a few days. Wife drove me 40 miles to another hospital. They rushed me to the catheterization laboratory in nick of time. Had 200% blockage of coronary left anterior descending artery, also known as the Widowmaker heart attack. I was in my early 20s and very naive. I began having gynecological problems and started seeing a gynecologist at the county hospital. I knew his exams were weird and I hated them because he would be doing things that didn't seem necessary. One day I was in the exam room waiting to see him when I heard the lady in the next room yelling at him to stop rubbing my clitoris, "You freaking pervert." This was back in 1984. Doctors examined you without a nurse in the room. I ran out and never went back. I had a brown recluse bite under my nose and it began to open up. I went to the urgent care. The doctor told me to lay down and prepare myself. Now I work in healthcare, so I already knew this wouldn't feel good because he told me he was going to scrape out what was going on, pack it, and send me on the way. He comes in, doesn't give me any warning, and shoves a needle in my face with a lidocaine. Doesn't wait for it to localize and began to scrape out the wound. I gave birth naturally and would rather do that again than have to go through that horror ever again. I was in shock, just uncontrollably shaking after the pain. My new doctor looked up my pharmacy report before my visit. As is custom, I lived with my terminally ill brother whose name was James and mine Jamie, so we had the same address, phone number, and initials and similar names. When they ran my pharmacy report as they normally do, my brother's many medications showed up on my list. The doctor yelled at me, calling me a drug seeker, and kicked me out of the office while I cried and pleaded with him to listen to me and that those medications were my brother's and not mine. He said that is not possible and that couldn't happen. I ended up calling the board of pharmacy, who informed me that yes, closely named relatives who live together could show up on the same report, and the name doesn't show but a patient number does. And if the doctor looks closely, he will see 2 different numbers. The board member called the doctor and said he had to search by my social security number to get a more thorough search. Upon doing this, he realized his mistake and profusely apologized, and my visit was free. He had no idea that 2 people could show up on the same report if they have similar details. And now he tells this story at all his conferences so other doctors don't make the same mistake. Most of them had no idea that could happen either. Well, they do now. When I wanted a hysterectomy because my life was literally in danger due to anemia and non-stop bleeding, and was told no because my husband might want kids. I am not, nor have I ever been married. I was in my 40s and I didn't want kids in the first place, but after explaining all this, was still told no because I might meet a man and he might want to knock me up at over 40, and I did not get a say, apparently. I went to Mexico and they yoinked that thing out for me. I came back and met with a completely different doctor for follow-up. When he learned I had a hysterectomy without my future husband's consent, he told me he wouldn't treat me and to see Planned Parenthood for any future care because they're used to dealing with women. This was 6 years ago, if you're wondering, 2017. I have no reason to think that anything has changed and quite a few reasons to think it's getting worse. I've had severe chronic pain for the last 11 years, but I also have a very high pain threshold. I was weaning off my medications, so we could possibly begin looking at starting a family. Everything was going okay, I was in more pain, but I was managing it when one night I woke up screaming. I couldn't put my leg on the ground. I went to the emergency room and I spent 3 hours sitting outside the front door in a wheelchair vomiting and shaking in pain before they let me in, and without any x-rays told me I had a pulled hamstring and told me to take ibuprofen. I went to my doctor 2 days later when the pain was no better and hadn't slept more than 10 minutes at a time. His exact words were, "How do you expect to have a baby if you can't handle a few sleepless nights?" I left there so disheartened and felt like I was overreacting. Weeks later, after spending most days screaming in pain and thinking I was overreacting, I started losing bladder control and went to see my pain specialist, who is amazing. She had me in an MRI that day, and I was operated on by my neurosurgeon the day after. I was diagnosed with Claudia Equina syndrome. He said Had I waited any longer, I could have ended up with a permanent wheelchair and urinary catheter. He rang both the emergency room and my doctor in front of me and yelled at them. I realize I'm lucky I have two specialists who have my best interests at heart, but I've never felt so gaslit in my life. Went to the dermatologist to have a mole on my back removed and biopsied. I was laying on my stomach and the doctor was on one side of me and his assistant on the other. They're talking like they haven't caught up in months, and I feel like an afterthought and am getting annoyed. Is this my time or theirs? Then I feel this searing pain immediately followed by warm liquid falling down my side, and I heard the doctor say, "Oops." You never want to hear a doctor say, "Oops." I was fully annoyed at this point and said, "Would you mind paying attention to what you're doing when you have a scalpel in your hand?" I ended up needing like 5 stitches and I have an inch-long scar there now. I went back into the changing room. They initially put me in to get dressed. I was basically topless when I noticed a window washer hanging outside the window just looking in. Annoyance turned into outrage, and after I got dressed, went out in the waiting room and unloaded on the staff in front of a room full of people waiting to be seen, leaving nothing out. I hope at least a few of them decided to cancel their appointments. I never went back, that's for sure. I had pinched my sciatic nerve pushing carts at work. He accused me of having a very kinky sexual life while my girlfriend was in the room. I told him it was at work, and he assured me he would not judge me if it was my preference. He then gave me Oxycontin and told me whenever I needed refill I should call him, and he'd make sure I'd have plenty. Very weird. The other is super mild, but he kept farting. Like the whole time he'd fart every few minutes. I went to a clinic to see a doctor about a fever and body aches and informed him I was allergic to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAID. He said he'd give me something and it was not an NSAID. Went home, swallowed the pill, immediate allergic reaction starts, rushed to the accident and emergency A&E of a hospital where they pumped me full of drugs to stop the allergic reaction, and the doctor there asked me why I took the NSAID. I think the A&E doctor reported the clinic doctor because he was never seen again. The ear, nose, and throat doctor removed a skin cancer from my nose, leaving an ugly scar. Turns out he excised the wrong area and I went to a different doctor to actually remove the cancer. I was getting a bone density scan for some odd reason, and the doctor came in a while later and told me I had osteoporosis. This was not why I was there in the first place and was completely surprised. I asked him if I could see the chart and it was for a 70-year-old woman. I was a 30-something man and he had the wrong chart. Turns out I did not have any issues at all. Well, bone density related. When I was 17, I had an infected ingrown toenail. My pediatrician tried cutting and digging it out with what looked like pliers and bracing his leg against the table. After messing around a bit, he realized he wasn't going to get it. No numbing gel or anything, hurt like hell. Scheduled an appointment with a podiatrist. He numbed it, had it removed in about 2 minutes, and told me to never see that doctor again. Laid on my side with my back to the door for a prostate examination. Heard people walk by talking while a finger was in my buttocks and realized the door was open. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, reactions, and of course your own wild stories in the comments, and here's another video YouTube thinks you'll love.